The dying world of Sarion 7 flickered beneath the stars, its surface littered with the orange bloom of planetary firestorms and the thin trails of civilian escape craft trying, and failing, to outrun fate. Above it, the Varn Dominion fleet held formation like a school of predators in still water, watching the slow unraveling of another human colony with the detached amusement of a seasoned butcher. High Commander Zareth stood at the helm of the Iridax, arms folded behind his long, crimson-plated frame. His voice, as always, oozed a certain ceremonial boredom. "Do you know how many colonies we've eradicated this cycle, Threll?" Subcommander Threll didn't bother to guess. He simply nodded, eyes scanning the tactical readouts pulsing across the dark glass walls. 27, High Commander. Including the covert settlements in the Orionic dust bands. Zareth clicked his teeth in mock surprise. 27. And not one act of meaningful resistance. It's tragic, really. You'd think a species that once defied the Tekri swarm would at least try to put up a fight. Below them, the colony's central dome split like a cracked egg, atmospheric seals bursting in silent, sudden flashes of vacuum bloom. Zareth barely blinked. They've grown quiet, like prey who've accepted the teeth. Threll cleared his throat. There were signals, sir. Encrypted. A broadcast loop from Earth-based code. Earth. Zaretha's tone shifted ever so slightly. A dead ember. Perhaps, Threll said. But the signals are recent. There's power on the surface. Minimal, but focused. Zareth waved it off, his gaze still locked on the flames curling across the Sarion continent. Another trick. We've seen their desperation before. Populated illusions, mimicked distress calls, hollow beacons from abandoned mining rigs. Their defiance has become decorative. Threll didn't answer. He had long learned the difference between speaking and surviving in Zaretha's presence. But something twisted quietly in his gut, the way instincts often did when logic refused to listen. They moved from Sarion 7 within the hour. The Varn fleet, 19 vessels strong, adjusted trajectory and prepared a precision jump to Sol, the Forbidden System. Earth itself. Not since the early campaigns had any Varn ship dared approach it, but Zareth had grown tired of ceremony. If humanity clung to scraps of myth and memory, he would burn even that from the stars. The jump was uneventful. The fleet emerged into high orbit around the third planet, cloaked in electronic veils and accompanied by their siphon drones. Earth hung below, half in shadow. Quiet. Still. Beautiful in a way Threll hated to admit. Zareth stepped forward, his hands clasped. Scan the surface. Identify monuments. Cultural centers. Strike them first. One of the junior navigators hesitated. There's no resistance, sir. No planetary defense. No orbital activity. It's as if they've already surrendered? Zareth finished for him, smiling thinly. No poetry in that, but fine. We'll give them something to remember on the way out. The first strike launched. A kinetic rod, sleek and invisible, plunged through what had once been the European Union's governmental dome. The second strike vaporized an old launch facility in Kazakhstan. The third was en route to a dormant city near the coastlines of the old Americas. Then everything changed. The Iridax's lights flickered. A low, rhythmic pulse echoed through every system, no source, no origin point, just there, like a heartbeat inside the ship's bones. A transmission override forced itself onto every console. A voice. Human. Calm. Warning. A human war vessel has entered the war zone. Zareth turned slowly. Where is that coming from? No known location, High Commander, Threll answered, now fully alert. It bypassed our layers. Even the quantum filters. Echoes? Zareth asked. A trick of sound? Not sound. Signature. It's not repeating, it's alive. Adaptive. The main viewport darkened, then brightened again. Something was there. A shadow. A shape that hadn't existed moments ago. Not warped in, not decloaked. It simply hadn't been, until it was. Massive. silent. Matte black armor that drank in the starlight. It hung just beyond Earth's magnetic line, perfectly still, its silhouette cutting across the horizon like a blade. No visible engines. No known configuration. Zareth took a step back involuntarily. Identify that vessel. No one answered. The ship was not in any known registry. Not Varn. Not old human navy. Not even in the theoretical threat simulations. Then the voice returned. Warning. This sector is under Earth sovereign protocol. Any hostile action will be met with full retaliation. Retaliation? Zareth barked, regaining composure. Fire. Test its shields. 2 Varn cruisers moved into formation and discharged plasma torpedoes, high-yield, antimatter tip. One never saw its payload reach the target. The human vessel reacted without visible propulsion. It simply shifted. A ripple of motion. The Varn cruiser shattered in 3 separate places, its hull bisected in clean lines before it even registered damage. The second cruiser managed to fire, once. Then its core folded inward, the laws of inertia breaking around it like glass. No explosions. Just erasure. Zareth staggered. What weapon was that? Unknown, said Threll, his voice quiet. There was no energy spike. No thermal discharge. Just data loss. They watched in stunned silence as the black vessel moved again, silently. It wasn't approaching. It was surrounding them. Multiples. 4. 12. One had become a fleet. The transmission played again. Same tone, same calm. Warning. A human war vessel has entered the war zone. Zareth turned toward Threll, pale now beneath his deep red skin. How many are there? Threll looked at the screen. Unknown. They're not broadcasting, but they exist outside our sensors. I think they were waiting for us. The silence was thick, suffocating. No one dared breathe. Outside, the stars began to shift, wormhole ripples, unseen gates opening one after another. More ships, hundreds perhaps. Some small, some the size of cities. And not one announced itself with fanfare. Just that voice. Always the voice. A declaration, not a threat. Zareth's voice cracked as he turned to his bridge crew. Retreat. Now. But it was too late. Every escape vector showed the same thing. Vessels already in place, blocking exodus before the order was even given. The Iridax's engines powered down without command, shut off remotely, a surgical kill. Threll, barely breathing, muttered, "They knew we were coming." Zareth didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the central screen where the human dreadnought now hovered directly above them, its underbelly opening slowly, not to fire, but to show rows of segmented modules, each bearing the Earth sovereign insignia. One last transmission. Protocol 1 enacted. Decoy phase complete. Prepare for Phase 2. Zareth staggered back to his command throne, cold sweat beating at his temples. This isn't war. Threll's voice was barely audible. No. This is something else. The stars watched in silence as the Varn fleet, once unstoppable, hung paralyzed in the hands of a ghost they thought they'd buried. The silence lingered. Then, the screen cut to black, and the voice whispered one last time. Welcome back to Earth. No alarms sounded on the Iridax. There was no siren protocol for a fleet-wide shutdown imposed by an unseen enemy. The systems hadn't failed. They'd surrendered, piece by piece, to an intrusion so precise it might as well have been surgical. Zareth stood motionless in the darkened command bridge, eyes locked on the static-laced holomap that had once shown their dominion over the Sol system. Now it was blank. Even their own ships no longer registered. They've erased our presence from our own network, Threll whispered, scrolling through voided data feeds. Our fleet appears as debris. No active transponders. No IFF signatures. Zareth didn't answer. He was staring at his own reflection in the blackened screen, watching the faint tremor in his jaw. From somewhere in the command pit, a quiet voice. "High Commander, did we provoke a trap?" Zareth turned slowly. We do not walk into traps. We make them. But even he didn't believe it anymore. Behind him, Threll's hands moved feverishly across a decrypted console, digging for residual patterns. What he found wasn't a virus. It was a message. A log. Earth's transmission. The final lines repeated over and over, not just in English, but in dozens of languages, some extinct, others newly evolved. But the meaning was always the same. You've made your mistake. This time, you came to us. Zaratha's breath caught. He had heard of Earth's myths, old ghost stories about warlords, weapons buried deep beneath Martian ice, orbiting AIs sleeping in blackout shells waiting for humanity's return. They'd always been regarded as propaganda, disinformation to frighten smaller empires. But myths didn't disable Warfleet. And they certainly didn't build ships like that. Threll leaned in closer to the signal data. They baited us. The colonies. They were never fortified because they weren't meant to be. Every one of them a decoy. Bleeding edges. Zaratha's tone was acid. Are you suggesting we were lured? Threll hesitated. Yes. And not just us. They let us grow overconfident. They gave us decades of silence, weakness, and decay, and watched. Outside the viewport, the black dreadnought remained idle. Not threatening. Not even targeting. It was waiting. A strategic pause. Psychological warfare at its most precise. Zarath turned on his heel and descended the command dais in clipped, precise step. Signal the Dominion. All corps. All councils. Tell them what we saw. Tell them to prepare for interspecies counter-assault. Threll didn't move. Zaratha's voice sharpened. Now. There's an issue, Threll said. Our comm systems, long-range relays, have been rerouted. To what? To Earth. Everything routes through them now. Zarath froze. They're controlling our messages? Threll's eyes flicked up from the console. They're reading them before they're sent. The words hung like ash. And then, without fanfare, the screen blinked to life again. No warning. No sound. Just a visual. A playback reel, stitched from 1,000 sources, showing one thing: humanity's wars. Zarath watched as footage streamed, gritty, brutal, historic. World War I trench footage, men clawing mud and barbed wire. Napalm searing across Vietnam forests. Satellites crashing over desert rebellions. Then came the orbital wars, the rogue lunar factions, the Second Martian Revolution, the fall of Europa's corporate syndicates, the rise and fall of Earth's globalist regime, and the war that silenced it all, the three-day purge. Hundreds of years of brutality. War as craft. War as doctrine. War as inheritance. The footage ended on a still shot, an empty command seat. Human-built. Scorched. Surrounded by the bodies of those who'd defended it. A phrase faded into view across the feed. We are what war made us. The screen blinked off. No ship moved. No command issued. But the damage had been done. Zarath sank into his seat, breathing slow. Controlled. They're not using force. They're using fear. Fear that they've earned, Threll muttered. In the dim silence that followed, Subcommander Illith entered the bridge. She was younger, genetically optimized for tactical mathematics, not politics. But even her face held the gray veil of someone who had looked at the abyss and seen something staring back. We ran models, she said without ceremony. Simulations. Human fleet patterns based on what we observed. There's no logic to their formations. Zarath looked up, frowning. Explain. They're chaotic. At first. Then they cohere mid-engagement. They react faster than our AI cores can calculate. And when they're not reacting, they're predicting. Zaratha's voice grew low. You're saying they're anticipating us? Illith nodded. Like a mirror that cracks in the same way every time you strike it. Silence. Then a new voice broke across the bridge. This is Admiral Reyna Volkov of the Vindicator. You are now under containment status. We are not here for conquest. We are here for correction. Everyone froze. It wasn't a recording. It was live. Zarath stood. Open channel. No, Threll said flatly. It's already open. A shimmer at the edge of the viewport, another ship. Not massive like the dreadnought, but sleeker. Agile. Human design, unmistakable. Even beautiful in its terrifying simplicity. The voice returned, not angry, not threatening. Just disappointed. You were warned. By our silence. You misread it as weakness. Zareth tried to project confidence. We are the Varn Dominion. Our laws are galactic. You trespass in systems designated as pacified. Volkov's voice was a cold whisper. You murdered 17 billion civilians. There is no law that defends what comes next. Threll closed his eyes. She's stalling. Zareth nodded. For what? Then they saw it, streaks of light bending space like curved glass. Wormholes. Micro-fissures in the void. From them, smaller human ships emerged. Hundreds. No grand reveal, no ceremonial formation. Just cold, deliberate arrival. They dispersed like ink in water, encircling each Varn vessel with surgical calm. Zaretha's mouth dried. They're not launching weapons. They don't need to, Threll said. They're letting us watch as they remove options. Volkov's voice once again. Stand down. You've already lost. Illith murmured, what if she's right? Zareth turned sharply. They killed 2 of our cruisers, yes. But that's not a war. That's an ambush. And yet, Threll whispered, they haven't fired since. Zareth narrowed his eyes. They want us to be afraid. No, Illith said. They want us to understand. The bridge fell quiet again. Then, without permission, the Iridax's navigation chart zoomed outward. A human override. What it showed was impossible. A map of the galaxy and a blinking path from Earth to the outer reaches of Varn space. Human waypoints. Human beacons. Already there. Zareth whispered, how long have they been preparing this? Threll answered with something between awe and horror, longer than we've been watching. Volkov spoke again, final and resolute. Your mistake was thinking you had the upper hand. But we are not your prey. We are the ones you left behind. We remember. The transmission ended. Outside, the dreadnought turned, still without a weapon deployed, still without a single shot fired, and disappeared into the darkness beyond Earth, leaving behind only its silent fleet. Zareth sat down. Slowly. The weight of what he'd seen, what he'd missed, anchoring every breath. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. And yet, everyone on that bridge knew. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The high chamber of the Varn Dominion's core assembly had never been so quiet. Hushed murmurs, once the background noise of routine political disputes, had vanished. Instead, every senator, every marshal, every fleetmaster sat frozen, eyes fixed on the floating image above the central dais. Earth's message, now replayed for the 3rd time. The room, layered with obsidian stone and glowing script of ancient Varn conquests, no longer radiated power. It felt like a tomb. High Chancellor Curith, a being who had presided over 5 expansions, 3 suppressions, and the extinction of 4 civilizations, leaned forward with clawed fingers steepled under his chin. His voice was like grinding stone. Is there any evidence this projection was fabricated? Silence. Then Admiral Joran, Zaretha's superior in title, but long irrelevant in strategy, spoke with a trembling resonance. No, Chancellor. The encryption markers are verified. They've taken control of nearly a third of our outer relay network. Even our black frequency channels reroute through them. So they control our communications. They display old war footage. They spooked Zareth. Curith stood. But that does not mean they can win. Across the chamber, a younger voice broke through. Terse, confident. They don't have to win. They just have to prove they're not afraid of us anymore. All eyes turned to Counselor Valek. Young for his rank, but brilliant. Dangerous. His scars weren't from battle. They were self-inflicted, ritual reminders of lessons learned. He stepped into the chamber's light. Look at the footage again. Look at their strategy. This wasn't improvised. This was deployed with centuries of planning. They built decoy colonies. They leaked misinformation. They staged defeats to lull us into comfort. A general scoffed. Conspiracy. We would have seen it. Valek smiled without warmth. You did see it. You just dismissed it. That was the point. They understood us better than we understood them. Because they studied us while pretending to vanish. The air shifted. Uneasy. Kurith gestured sharply. You're suggesting we've already lost. I'm suggesting we're still thinking like conquerors. Valek's voice dropped. And they're thinking like survivors who learned. Across the stars, far from the core, Zareth sat alone in his private war chamber aboard the Iridax, replaying the footage from Volkov's ship. Her words struck him differently now, less like threats, more like facts being laid bare. The human fleet hadn't attacked again. They hadn't needed to. They had disabled fear as a weapon. A chime sounded. Zareth didn't respond. The door slid open anyway. Illith stepped in, holding a datapad. Her expression was taut. We intercepted more footage. Zareth turned slowly. Of what? Human war simulations. Not historical records. Training drills. Modern ones. She handed him the pad. The screen flared to life. He watched. Battles conducted with digital efficiency, soldiers adapting in real time to impossible scenarios, enemy mimics, vacuum breach combat, autonomous units coordinating without command, infantry working seamlessly with orbital strikes, and above all, no glory, no cheering, no celebration, just success, mission complete, move to the next. They don't fight for honor, Illith murmured. They fight to finish. Zareth said nothing. His mind was running faster than it had in cycles. He saw it now, the deception, the misread silence, the way Earth had become a myth on purpose. Humanity had learned something fundamental about war, that it was more effective when not paired with vanity. Threll entered, flustered. Message from the core. Emergency summit in 4 hours. You're expected to present a counter-strategy. Zareth didn't look at him. There is no counter-strategy. Not until we understand them. You've seen the footage. What more? No, Zareth stood. I mean understand them emotionally. This isn't just about weaponry. It's about why they returned. Why now? Why not decades ago? Illith frowned. Retaliation? Revenge? No, Zaretha's voice was steady now, colder. They don't want revenge. They want control. Control over their future. And to get it, they're rewriting the terms of power. He walked to the main display, activated the star map. A new sector blinked. Hale 9, a human-tracked region thought to be uninhabited. Now, a fleet signature showed there. Human. Broadcasting openly. They're showing us pieces. Enough to provoke fear. Enough to scatter us politically. Threll hesitated. Then why not strike while we're destabilized? Because destabilizing us is the strike. Silence. Illitha's eyes widened. They're breaking us before they fire a single shot. Zareth turned. And once we break ourselves, they'll offer order. Aboard the Vindicator, Admiral Reyna Volkov walked through a corridor of officers reviewing intercepted Varn transmissions. She paused by a viewport. Outside, autonomous drones repaired a minor hull fracture from a near-miss orbital collision. The humans had dozens of these repair units. Unmanned, untiring. Commander Len Marlowe joined her. We've confirmed their reactions proceeding as predicted. Infighting has begun. Core assembly splintering. Volkov nodded. They think we're still escalating? She asked. Marlowe smirked. They're preparing for a full-scale war. And we're not. It wasn't a question. No, Admiral. We already fought ours. Now we're finishing it. She turned slowly, the weight of years etched across her features. Did you see what Zareth did? He didn't retaliate. He watched. He's learning. That makes him dangerous. Marlowe leaned against the bulkhead. You want him removed? Volkov shook her head. No. I want him spared. He raised an eyebrow. Because he's the only one over there who's beginning to understand us. And we'll need someone like that when the time comes to build. She returned to the command deck. Maintain containment formations. No firing unless engaged. Broadcast the message again. We do not seek conquest. But we will not retreat. Back aboard the Iridax, Zareth sat at the edge of his private chamber, staring into the artificial night of the viewport. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was something worse, curious. Why didn't you strike us when you had the chance? He asked aloud, as if speaking to a ghost. He half expected silence, but the screen shimmered. A single message appeared, untraceable. Human encoded. No signature. Because victory isn't about death. It's about what survives after. He stared. For the first time in his life, Zareth felt the weight of a war not yet fought, and realized he'd already lost the one he thought he'd won. And somewhere in the stars, the fleet of Earth moved again. Quietly. Efficiently. As if history itself were shifting to make room for them. It began, not with a declaration, but with silence. The Varn Dominion's command fleet in the outer Helix arm vanished from long-range detection grids in under 12 minutes. No explosions. No visible signatures. Just a coordinated failure of presence. As if the very idea of them had been deleted. Zareth stood over a war table illuminated by tactical overlays. Each blinking red dot represented a Varn stronghold gone dark. Some had been militarized for centuries. Some had never seen battle. It didn't matter. All were now ghost systems. Threll read the data aloud, voice flat. No bodies. No survivors. No confirmed kills. Just absence. Ilitha's fingers tapped against her pad. The only commonality? Each site housed a primary communications relay. Zareth didn't speak. His eyes followed a new pattern. Arcs of human-controlled wormhole gates forming behind Varn territory. They weren't striking into enemy territory. They were folding behind it. Encirclement. Not for siege. For suffocation. They're not just defeating us, Ilith said quietly. They're erasing the Dominion's reach. Outside the Iridax, a human drone swarm moved in coordinated silence, weaving between gravity pulses like needlework. Repair bots, data siphons, and microscouts filled the void around the now-disabled Varn outpost of Elker 3. None were armed. None needed to be. The message was clear. We already control the space you once ruled. Zareth clenched his jaw. Send message to command. No further engagements. Total withdrawal from forward systems. Re-strategize around civilian preservation. Threll didn't move. You're calling a retreat? No, Zareth said. I'm calling the only move left. At the Dominion's core assembly, the fracture had become collapse. Senators screamed across the chamber floor. Orders contradicted one another. Entire sectors declared neutrality, some openly broadcasting to Earth in hopes of mercy. Others rallied for suicide strikes, not for victory, but for pride. Valek, standing before a cracked hologram of Varn borders, delivered the last analysis anyone would hear that day. We cannot win this through arms. Because this was never a war of weapons. It was a war of memory. The humans remember what it cost them. And they will not let us forget it. He looked at the flickering map one last time. And they've shown us what real power is. It's not dominance. It's survival with purpose. Then came the final battle. Not in any traditional sense, but in scale. It began when 12 human-controlled wormholes opened simultaneously across Varn's central space. No announcement. No warning. Just the quiet, coordinated movement of autonomous fleets, black-armored and silent, phasing into orbit above every key administrative world. Zareth watched from the Iridax's war deck. The live feeds showed it all. Varn cruisers powering down voluntarily, soldiers standing still, planetary leaders transmitting full surrender codes before a single demand was even issued. The humans never fired. Their ships hovered, massive and still, like the judgment of history itself, broadcasting one universal message. You are now under stabilization protocol. All systems will be restructured. Resistance is not necessary. We do not retaliate. We correct. On Varn Prime, High Chancellor Curatha's citadel was left untouched. No bombards, no troops, just a single human diplomat walking calmly through the capital square, escorted by nothing but silence. She entered the citadel without resistance and delivered 2 documents. One was an unconditional ceasefire agreement. The other was a commission. It named Zareth as provisional governor under the Unified Accord, Earth's newly declared framework for galactic administration. He accepted, not out of fear, out of understanding, because by then even Zareth knew, the war was over, and Earth had not won through might. They had waited, endured, learned, and then, when the time was right, they moved. Not like conquerors, but like surgeons healing a wound they'd been watching fester for too long. In the final hours of Dominion rule, Zareth stood before what remained of the Varn assembly. The air felt too still. His voice was firm. You thought victory was in the numbers, in the steel, in the fear we imposed. But they taught us something more terrifying than defeat, patience guided by memory. He paused. We were wrong to forget who they were. And now, they will remind the galaxy what they've become. Later, aboard the Vindicator, Admiral Reyna Volkov read the final transmission from Zareth. It was not an appeal, not a demand, just 6 words. We are ready to serve differently. She closed the message, eyes heavy. Commander Marlowe stepped beside her. He'll govern. He'll do more than govern, she replied. He'll witness, and others will follow. Marlowe folded his arms. And after this? Volkov didn't look at him. We go further. The galaxy waited, wide, ancient, brutal. There were still empires rooted in blood. Still machines pretending to be God. Still corners where memory hadn't reached. But now Earth had returned, not to rule, not to avenge, to shape. And as their ships fanned outward from the smoldering edges of a collapsed dominion, humanity spoke not with cannons or flags, but with precision, silence, and the chilling clarity of those who had learned never to forget again. The war was over. The future had begun.